The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers like sand. Right now, as you sit there, think about something you want desperately. Feel that tension in your chest, that knot in your stomach. That's the sound of you strangling your own dreams. Raise your hand if you've ever chased something so hard that it seemed to run away from you faster. Keep it up. Look around. Every single person in this room knows exactly what I'm talking about, because we've all been conditioned to believe that wanting something badly enough will make it happen. We've been taught that desperation equals dedication, that struggle equals strength, that if we're not bleeding for our goals, we're not working hard enough. This is the greatest lie ever sold to humanity. You want success? Stop chasing it like a starving dog chases scraps. You want love? Stop hunting for it like a predator stalks prey. You want respect? Stop begging for it like a child pleads for attention. You want peace? Stop fighting for it like a warrior battles enemies. The very act of desperate pursuit creates the resistance that keeps what you want just out of reach. Watch a child try to catch a butterfly. The harder they run, the faster it flies away. But when they sit still, focused on something else entirely, the butterfly lands on their shoulder without effort. This isn't coincidence. This is the fundamental law of attraction operating exactly as it should. The person desperately seeking happiness runs from experience to experience, relationship to relationship to relationship, achievement to achievement, always believing the next thing will be the one. They are like a dog chasing its own tail. The faster they run, the further away their goal appears. The happiness they seek exists in the space between their desperate breaths, in the between their frantic thoughts, but they're moving too fast to notice it's already there. Your mind right now is probably resisting this idea. It's telling you that if you don't struggle, you don't deserve success. It's whispering that ease equals weakness, that if something comes naturally it has no value. These thoughts are not your thoughts, they are programming installed by a society that worships suffering and mistakes activity for achievement. The fundamental error destroying your life is believing that life is a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be experienced. You approach your desires like a warrior going to battle, armed with strategies and force, when what's required is the wisdom of water, fluid, adaptable, finding the natural path forward without resistance. Stand up for a moment. Make a fist. Squeeze it as tight as you can, tighter. Feel the tension in your entire arm, spreading up to your shoulder, into your neck. This is what your life looks like when you try to force outcomes. Now open your hand completely. Let it relax. Feel how that tension melts away instantly. This is what happens when you stop trying to control everything and allow life to flow through you instead of fighting against it. Consider the entrepreneur who works 20-hour days, sacrificing health, relationships, and sanity in pursuit of financial freedom. They push and strain, believing that more effort equals more results. But watch what happens. Stress clouds their judgment, desperation repels opportunities, exhaustion kills creativity. They're competitors who work with natural rhythm, who know when to act and when to wait, who treat business like a dance rather than a war, effortlessly achieve what the first person bleeds for. Who here has ever been so tired that you couldn't think straight, yet you kept working anyway? Raise your hands, keep them up. You were operating under the delusion that exhausted effort is somehow more valuable than rested effectiveness. You were choosing to be a martyr instead of a master. This is not about being passive or lazy. Anyone who thinks letting go means giving up has completely missed the point. This is about understanding the difference between productive action and destructive forcing. It's about recognizing that there's a rhythm to everything, and when you align with that rhythm instead of fighting against it, you become unstoppable. The musician doesn't force the melody, they feel it and follow it. The artist doesn't force the painting, they allow it to emerge through them. The athlete doesn't force peak performance, they create conditions where excellence can express itself naturally. In every field of human achievement, the masters are those who have learned to work with natural principles rather than against them. Real power comes from understanding that the universe operates on principles of harmony, not conflict. When you're in harmony with these principles, doors open without you having to break them down, opportunities appear without you having to create them. Solutions emerge without you having to force them into existence, but your mind loves to complicate simple truths. It will create elaborate theories about why this can't work for you, why your situation is different, why you're the exception to every rule. Your mind has become your worst enemy, convincing you that peace means defeat, that ease means laziness, that flow means failure. The person who's trying too hard to be funny never gets the laugh. Think about it. You know someone like this, don't you? They work so hard at being amusing that they become painful to be around. Meanwhile, the naturally funny person isn't trying at all. Humor flows through them effortlessly because they're not attached to the outcome. The salesperson who reeks of desperation never closes the deal. You can smell their neediness from across the room. Their customers sense it immediately and run in the opposite direction. But the salesperson who genuinely believes in their product and cares about helping people find solutions attracts buyers without any high-pressure tactics. The lover who clings too tightly always gets pushed away. The tighter they squeeze, the more their partner struggles to escape. They mistake possessiveness for love, control for care, jealousy for passion. Meanwhile, the person who loves freely, without attachment or demand, becomes irresistible. The student who tries to force understanding never truly learns. They memorize facts without grasping principles, study techniques without developing wisdom, accumulate information without gaining insight. But the student who approaches learning with curiosity and patience finds that knowledge reveals itself naturally. Why does this happen every single time? Because desperation creates tension, and tension blocks the natural flow of energy that makes things happen effortlessly. When you're desperate, you're operating from a state of scarcity, believing there's not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough love, not enough success to go around. This scarcity mindset makes you grasp at everything, which ironically ensures you hold on to nothing. You become like a person trying to carry water in cupped hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it leaks through your fingers. But when you operate from abundance, knowing that there's more than enough for everyone, including you, you can afford to be selective. You can wait for the right opportunity instead of jumping at the first one. You can choose quality over quantity. You can move with precision instead of panic. How many of you have made a major decision from a place of desperation? Be honest, how did that work out for you? Exactly. Desperate decisions are almost always poor decisions because desperation clouds judgment, eliminates options, and forces you to accept less than you deserve. The master martial artist doesn't waste energy on unnecessary movements. Every action serves a purpose, flows naturally from the previous one, and sets up the next. There's no struggle, no strain, no desperate flailing. Just pure, efficient, powerful movement that appears effortless to observers but is actually the result of deep understanding and perfect alignment with natural principles. This same principle applies to every area of your life. The master lover doesn't chase, they attract. The master entrepreneur doesn't force. They create conditions for success to emerge naturally. The master communicator doesn't argue. They influence through understanding and timing. You've been taught that life is hard, that you must suffer for success, that good things come to those who fight for them. But look around at the truly successful people, the ones who seem to have life figured out. Are they the ones burning themselves out in constant struggle? Or are they the ones who've learned to work with life's natural currents instead of against them? The river doesn't struggle to reach the ocean. It simply flows, following the path of least resistance, and inevitably arrives at its destination. Does this make the river weak? Does this make its journey meaningless? Of course not. The river carves canyons, moves mountains, and shapes entire landscapes through the power of persistent flowing movement. The tree doesn't strain to grow, it simply extends toward the light, drawing nourishment from its roots, and becomes mighty without effort. Is the tree lazy because it doesn't force its growth? Is it weak because it bends with the wind? Ridiculous. The tree that bends survives the storm while the rigid tree breaks. The flower doesn't force itself to bloom. It simply opens when conditions are right, and its beauty emerges naturally. Does this make the flower's beauty less valuable? Does this make its fragrance less sweet? The opposite is true. Forced blooms wither quickly, but natural blooms create seeds for future generations. You are part of this same natural order, but you've forgotten. You've been conditioned to believe that you're separate from nature, that you must conquer it rather than cooperate with it. This separation is the source of all your struggles, all your stress, all your suffering. When you try to get something through force, you're declaring war on reality. You're saying that the natural order isn't good enough, that your timing is better than life's timing, that your way is superior to the way things actually work. This arrogance creates resistance, and resistance creates suffering. Can you feel the resistance in your life right now? Where are you pushing against doors that aren't ready to open? Where are you forcing conversations that aren't ready to happen? Where are you demanding results that aren't ready to appear? That friction you feel, that exhaustion, that frustration, that's the cost of fighting reality instead of flowing with it. But when you align yourself with the natural flow of events, when you learn to recognize the rhythm of opportunity and move with it rather than against it, everything becomes easier. Not because you're doing less, but because you're doing what's appropriate at the appropriate time in the appropriate way. Timing is everything. The right action at the wrong time produces the wrong result. The wrong action at the right time might still work, but the right action at the right time creates magic that looks like luck to people who don't understand the principle. The key insight that will change your life forever is this: what you're looking for is already looking for you. Success wants to find you as much as you want to find it. Love is seeking you as eagerly as you're seeking it. Peace is calling to you as loudly as you're calling to it. But your desperate searching creates so much noise that you can't hear life's response. It's like trying to hear a whisper while screaming. The harder you try to hear it, the more your own noise drowns it out. Only when you stop screaming can you hear what's been there all along. Sit quietly for just 10 seconds. Don't think about anything. Don't try to solve any problems. Don't plan your next move. Just sit and breathe. Do it now. 10 seconds. Ready, go. What did you notice? In that moment of stillness, did solutions start appearing? Did clarity begin to emerge? Did you feel a sense of peace that wasn't there when you were trying so hard? That's what's available to you every moment of every day, but you're usually too busy fighting to notice it. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on your dreams. Anyone who interprets this message as permission to be lazy has fundamentally misunderstood everything. This means shifting from forcing to allowing, from pushing to attracting, from struggling to flowing. It means becoming so confident in your worth that you don't need to prove it to anyone, including yourself. When you stop trying to get love and start being loving, love surrounds you. When you stop trying to get respect and start being respectable, respect flows to you naturally. When you stop trying to get rich and start creating value, wealth becomes inevitable. The person who's trying to get something is operating from a position of lack. They don't have it, so they must acquire it. But the person who's being something operates from a position of abundance. They already are it, so it naturally manifests in their external reality. This is why the best way to have something is to stop trying to get it and start being it. Want confidence? Stop trying to get it and start being confident. Want success? Stop chasing it and start being successful in small ways every day. Want peace? Stop seeking it and start being peaceful. The shift from having to being changes everything. Having is external and temporary. You can lose what you have. Being is internal and permanent. You can never lose what you are. Most people spend their entire lives trying to have more so they can do more so they can be more, but the sequence is backwards. When you are more, you naturally do more, which naturally leads to having more. Being is the foundation. Doing is the structure. Having is the result. Who here has ever gotten something they wanted desperately, only to find it didn't make them as happy as they expected? Raise your hands. The reason is simple. You were seeking external solutions to internal problems. You thought having the thing would make you feel complete, but completeness was never something you could acquire. It was something you always were. The student of life learns to be patient with the process, to trust in the timing, to maintain focus without desperation. They understand that everything worthwhile takes time to develop, like wine aging in the cellar, or a tree growing strong roots before reaching toward the sky. Impatience is the enemy of excellence. When you're impatient, you make poor decisions, skip important steps and accept inferior results just to get something quickly. But quality requires time, and time requires patience, and patience requires trust in the process. The process is always perfect, even when it doesn't feel like it. The delays that frustrate you are often preparing you for opportunities you couldn't have handled earlier. The obstacles that block your path are often redirecting you toward better possibilities you couldn't have seen from your original position. Think about a time when something you wanted desperately didn't work out, but later you realized it was the best thing that could have happened. We all have these stories. What seemed like a devastating rejection led to a better opportunity. What felt like a terrible loss cleared space for something wonderful. What appeared to be the worst timing turned out to be perfect timing. When you stop trying to control the process and start trusting it, you discover that life has a wisdom far greater than your limited perspective. What seemed like setbacks were actually setups. What felt like endings were actually beginnings. What appeared to be problems were actually solutions in disguise. This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as something to be eliminated, you begin to see it as space for possibility. Instead of needing to know how everything will work out, you become comfortable with not knowing, trusting that clarity will come when it's needed. The person who must have all the answers before they begin never begins. The person who needs guarantees before they act never acts. The person who demands certainty before they move never moves. But the person who's comfortable with uncertainty while maintaining clear direction moves with power and grace through any situation. This is the first great paradox. The more you need to know, the less you understand. The more you try to control, the more chaotic things become. The tighter you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. Only by loosening your grip do you gain true control, not control over outcomes, but control over your response to whatever outcomes arise. Your response is the only thing you can truly control, and it's the only thing you need to control. When you master your response to life's circumstances, you master life itself. When you can remain calm in chaos, centered in confusion, and peaceful in pressure, you become unstoppable. But this mastery doesn't come from fighting your emotions or suppressing your reactions. It comes from understanding that emotions are information, reactions are choices, and you have the power to between stimulus and response. In that lies your freedom. Most people are controlled by their immediate reactions. Something happens, they react automatically, and then they spend the rest of their time dealing with the consequences of that reaction. They live their entire lives one step behind themselves, always trying to fix problems created by their previous reactions. But when you learn to breathe, to choose your response consciously, you begin living proactively instead of reactively. You begin creating your life instead of just responding to it. You begin directing your energy instead of having it directed by circumstances. This is where the magic happens. In this space between what happens to you and how you respond, you find your power. In this moment of choice, you discover your freedom. In this breath of consciousness, you remember who you really are. You are not your circumstances. You are not your history. You are not your mistakes. You are not your current situation. You are the consciousness that observes all of these things, the awareness that experiences all of these conditions, the spirit that remains constant while everything else changes. From this perspective, nothing can truly harm you, because nothing can touch your essential self. Circumstances can be challenging, but they cannot diminish your worth. Events can be painful, but they cannot destroy your spirit. People can be difficult, but they cannot control your response. This realization is the beginning of true freedom. When you know that your happiness doesn't depend on getting what you want, you become free to want whatever you choose. When you know that your worth doesn't depend on external validation, you become free to be authentically yourself. When you know that your peace doesn't depend on controlling outcomes, you become free to act without attachment. Action without attachment is the secret of effortless achievement. You do what needs to be done without being emotionally invested in specific results. You give your best effort without being destroyed if that effort doesn't produce the outcome you hoped for. You care deeply about the process while remaining detached from the outcome. This detachment isn't indifference, it's wisdom. You still want good things to happen. You still work toward positive outcomes. You still feel disappointed when things don't go as planned, but these feelings don't control you, don't paralyze you, don't prevent you from taking the next appropriate action. The paradox deepens. The less attached you are to getting what you want, the more likely you are to get it. The less desperate you are for success, the more success flows to you. The less you need validation, the more respect you command. The less you chase happiness, the more happiness finds you. This isn't theory, this isn't philosophy, this is practical wisdom that you can test in your own life starting right now. Stop trying so hard to make something happen. Stop forcing conversations that aren't flowing naturally. Stop pushing for results that aren't ready to appear. Instead, do what's in front of you with complete attention and zero attachment to outcome. Watch what happens when you stop forcing. The moment you release that desperate grip, something extraordinary occurs. Power that was always yours suddenly becomes available. Energy that was trapped in resistance begins flowing freely. Opportunities that were hiding behind your desperation step forward into the light. Power isn't about domination, it's about liberation. True power liberates you from the need to prove yourself, from the compulsion to control others, from the exhaustion of constant struggle. When you find this power, you realize you've been fighting shadows while the real treasure was hidden in plain sight. Who is the strongest person you know? Not physically strong, truly strong. Think of them for a moment. Are they loud? Do they constantly tell people how powerful they are? Do they need to demonstrate their strength at every opportunity? Of course not. The strongest person in any room is often the quietest. They don't need to demonstrate their strength because they're secure in it. They don't need to announce their power because it radiates from their being. This is the power that comes from inner alignment, from being in harmony with yourself and with life. It's not the power of the tyrant who rules through fear, or the power of the manipulator who controls through deception. It's the power of the master who influences through understanding, who leads through example, who creates change through presence alone. Stand up again. This time try to force yourself to be powerful. Puff out your chest, make angry faces, clench your fists, shout if you want to. Feel how ridiculous this is, feel how much energy you're wasting. Feel how unconvincing it appears. Now drop all of that. Stand naturally, breathe normally, Look directly ahead with calm eyes. This quiet confidence is infinitely more powerful than any forced demonstration. You've been conditioned to believe that power requires effort, that strength comes from struggle, that achievement demands sacrifice. But observe the truly powerful. They make difficult things look easy. They handle pressure with calm. They navigate complexity with simplicity. They achieve extraordinary results with what appears to be ordinary effort. How is this possible? Because they've learned to work with the fundamental forces of reality instead of against them. They've found the current running through all of life. And when you align with this current, you're carried toward your destination with minimal effort. When you fight against it, every step becomes a battle. The martial artist who's mastered their art doesn't rely on brute force. Watch a master in action. They use timing, positioning, and the opponent's own energy against them. A small person can defeat a large person not through superior strength, but through superior understanding of leverage, balance, and natural movement. Raise your hand if you've ever seen this happen in real life. Someone smaller defeating someone bigger through skill rather than strength. Keep your hands up. You've witnessed the principle in action. Size doesn't determine outcome. Force doesn't guarantee victory. Understanding the rules of the game matters more than raw physical capability. In the same way, you can achieve massive results in your life not through massive effort, but through intelligent application of natural principles. You can influence people not through argument but through understanding what they truly want and helping them get it. You can build wealth not through grinding harder but through creating systems that work while you sleep. This is the secret of effortless power. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what's essential with complete focus and perfect timing. It's about recognizing that 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions, and learning to identify and focus on that crucial 20%. Look at your typical day. How much of what you do actually matters? How much of your activity produces real results? How much of your effort moves you closer to what you actually want? Be honest. For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. They scatter their energy in all directions, trying to do everything at once, and wonder why they make so little progress. But the master focuses like a laser beam, applying concentrated energy to the single most important thing until it's complete, then moving to the next most important thing. They understand that success isn't about being busy, it's about being effective. This requires the wisdom to know what not to do as much as what to do. Every yes to one thing is a no to something else. Every minute spent on a low-value activity is a minute not spent on a high-value activity. The successful person becomes skilled at elegant elimination, cutting away everything that's not essential so their energy can flow unobstructed toward what matters most. How many of you feel overwhelmed by all the things you think you should be doing? Raise your hands. Keep them up. Look around. This is the epidemic of our time. People drowning in options, paralyzed by possibilities, exhausted by endless choices. But this overwhelm isn't caused by having too much to do. It's caused by not knowing what actually needs to be done. When you're clear about your priorities, decisions become simple. When you know what you're building toward, every choice becomes obvious. When you understand what truly matters, everything else becomes irrelevant noise that you can ignore without guilt. But this isn't just about time management or productivity tactics. This is about aligning your actions with your deepest values and highest aspirations. When what you do is perfectly aligned with who you are, effort becomes effortless because you're no longer fighting against yourself. The internal conflict between what you think you should do and what you actually want to do creates enormous friction in your life. This friction wastes energy, creates stress, and guarantees that whatever you accomplish will feel hollow because it wasn't authentically yours. Think about a time when you were doing something you absolutely loved. Maybe you were so absorbed in it that you lost track of time. Maybe hours felt like minutes. Maybe you could have continued forever without feeling tired. That's what happens when your actions align with your nature. Energy flows instead of being forced. But when you eliminate this internal conflict by choosing a path that honors both your practical needs and your authentic desires, you tap into a source of energy that seems unlimited. Work becomes play. Challenges become adventures, obstacles become opportunities to demonstrate your creativity and resilience. This is why some people can work longer hours than others without burning out, why some people seem to have unlimited enthusiasm for their work while others drag themselves through each day. It's not about their circumstances, it's about their alignment. The person who's aligned with their purpose doesn't work for external rewards. They work because the work itself is rewarding. They don't need motivation from others because they're internally motivated. They don't need external validation because they're internally validated. Who here loves what they do for work, really loves it? Raise your hands high. Look at those faces. Do you see the difference? These people have energy that others don't. They have enthusiasm that can't be faked. They have a quality of presence that makes others want to be around them. This internal validation is the foundation of true confidence. Confidence isn't about feeling superior to others, that's arrogance. Confidence is about feeling adequate to whatever life presents to you. It's knowing that regardless of what happens, you have the resources to handle it gracefully. When you're truly confident, you don't need to be right all the time because your self-worth isn't dependent on being right. You don't need to win every argument because you're not trying to prove your value through verbal combat. You don't need to be perfect because you accept your humanity as part of your strength, not evidence of your weakness. This acceptance of your own imperfection is paradoxically what makes you powerful. When you're not wasting energy trying to maintain a perfect image, all that energy becomes available for actual achievement. When you're not afraid of making mistakes, you become willing to take intelligent risks. When you're not paralyzed by the fear of failure, you become capable of extraordinary success. The person who's afraid of failure is actually afraid of judgment, their own and others. But the person who's transcended this fear realizes that failure is just feedback, mistakes are just information, and judgment is just opinion. None of these things can actually hurt you unless you give them power over you. Raise your hand if you've ever avoided doing something because you were afraid of what people might think. Keep them up. Look around. We've all been prisoners of imaginary judgment, slaves to opinions that exist mostly in our own minds. The great liberation comes when you realize that most of what you've been afraid of exists only in your imagination. The real world is far more forgiving than the world you've created in your mind. People are too busy worrying about themselves to spend much time judging you. Failure is rarely as devastating as you imagine it will be. Success is rarely as difficult as you believe it must be. But you'll never know this truth as long as you're trying to protect yourself from imaginary dangers. Only by moving forward despite your fears do you realize how few of them were real. Only by taking action despite uncertainty do you understand how much you're actually capable of. The way forward isn't to eliminate fear, it's to act in the presence of fear. It's not to gain certainty, it's to move forward despite uncertainty. It's not to become fearless, it's to become fear-friendly. Recognizing fear as a natural part of growth rather than evidence that you should stop. When you make friends with fear instead of trying to eliminate it, you find that it often contains valuable information. Fear of physical danger keeps you safe. Fear of social rejection motivates you to develop genuine social skills. Fear of failure pushes you to prepare thoroughly. But you must learn to distinguish between intelligent fear that serves you and neurotic fear that imprisons you. Intelligent fear is specific, proportionate, and actionable. It warns you of real dangers and motivates you to take appropriate precautions. Neurotic fear is vague, excessive, and paralyzing. It sees danger everywhere and offers no constructive solutions. The master learns to listen to intelligent fear while ignoring neurotic fear. They take reasonable precautions while refusing to be paralyzed by unreasonable anxieties. They prepare for real challenges while refusing to worry about imaginary problems. This discernment comes from experience, from gradually expanding your comfort zone and understanding that most of what you feared was false. Each time you act despite fear and nothing terrible happens, your confidence grows. Each time you face a challenge and handle it successfully, your sense of your own capability expands. Over time, you develop what could be called anti-fragility, the ability to not just survive challenges, but to actually grow stronger because of them. Instead of being broken by adversity, you're forged by it. Instead of being weakened by stress, you're strengthened by it. Instead of being defeated by obstacles, you're refined by them. Think about the strongest people you know. Have they had easy lives, or have they faced significant challenges and learned to handle them with grace? Strength isn't the absence of difficulty. It's the ability to transform difficulty into wisdom, obstacles into opportunities, pain into power. This anti-fragility isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you develop through consistent practice, through voluntarily exposing yourself to manageable challenges that stretch your capabilities without overwhelming them. The person who avoids all discomfort becomes fragile. Any unexpected challenge can shatter them. But the person who regularly practices dealing with discomfort becomes resilient. They can handle whatever life presents because they've trained for it. How many of you deliberately seek out challenges to build your strength? Not many hands. Most people wait for challenges to find them, then wonder why they feel unprepared when difficulties arise. But the wise person creates controlled difficulty to build capability before uncontrolled difficulty tests them. This training isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. You train your mind to stay calm under pressure. You train your emotions to remain stable during turbulence. You train your spirit to maintain faith despite uncertainty. When all aspects of your being are trained and aligned, you become formidable, not because you're trying to intimidate others, but because you're unintimidated by circumstances. You become someone who can be counted on when things get difficult. Someone who rises to meet challenges rather than shrinking from them. This is the person others naturally want to follow, not because you're demanding leadership, but because you're demonstrating it. Leadership isn't about having authority over others, it's about having authority over yourself. When people see that you can govern yourself effectively, they trust you to help govern their circumstances. But this influence comes naturally, without manipulation or coercion. You don't need to convince people to follow you. They're drawn to your centered presence, your calm confidence, your ability to see clearly when others are confused. You become a source of stability in an unstable world. This stability isn't rigid, it's flexible, like a tree that bends with the wind but doesn't break. You adapt to circumstances while maintaining your core principles. You change your methods while keeping your values constant. You adjust your approach while staying true to your direction. People can sense this quality immediately. They recognize authentic strength because it feels different from forced strength. It's quiet instead of loud, confident instead of arrogant, flexible instead of rigid. It doesn't need to prove itself because it knows itself. When you possess this natural authority, doors open that remain closed to people who try to force their way through. Opportunities appear that were invisible to people who approach life with desperation. Resources become available that couldn't be accessed through manipulation or control. The effortless power comes from being so centered in your own truth that you don't need anything from anyone else. You're not trying to take anything. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to get anything. You're simply being yourself so completely that your presence becomes magnetic. This magnetism isn't something you can fake or manufacture. It emerges naturally when you stop trying to be someone else and start being yourself with complete commitment. It develops when you stop seeking approval and start giving approval to yourself. Most people are walking around seeking permission, permission to be themselves, permission to want what they want, permission to feel what they feel. But permission isn't something others can give you. It's something you must give yourself, and once you do, you become unstoppable. The person who gives themselves permission to be authentic doesn't need anyone else's approval. The person who gives themselves permission to pursue their dreams doesn't need anyone else's encouragement. The person who gives themselves permission to feel worthy doesn't need anyone else's validation. This self-authorization is the foundation of all personal power. When you become your own authority, instead of seeking authority from others, you stop being controlled by others' opinions, expectations, or demands. You begin living from the inside out instead of the outside in. Living from the inside out means your decisions are based on your values rather than others' expectations. It means your actions are guided by your principles rather than others' demands. It means your direction is determined by your vision rather than others' limitations. This doesn't mean being selfish or inconsiderate. It means being so secure in your own worth that you can afford to be generous with others. It means being so clear about your own needs that you can help others meet their needs without sacrificing your well-being. The person who gives from emptiness eventually has nothing left to give, but the person who gives from fullness can give generously without being depleted. They can love without losing themselves, serve without becoming servile, help without becoming helpless. This fullness isn't something you achieve once and maintain forever. It's something you cultivate daily through practices that nourish your body, mind, and spirit. These practices become non-negotiable, not because you're rigid, but because you've learned through experience that they're essential for your well-being. When your well-being is secure, you can weather any storm. When your inner resources are abundant, you can handle any demand. When your foundation is solid, you can build as high as you dream. But this foundation isn't built overnight. It's built through years of consistent choices, to honor your authentic self, to develop your natural gifts, to align your actions with your values, and to treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a dear friend. The effortless power emerges when you stop trying to become someone else and start becoming more yourself. It develops when you stop fighting your nature and start flowing with it. It appears when you stop forcing outcomes and start creating conditions for success to emerge naturally. This is power that serves rather than dominates, that creates rather than destroys, that builds rather than breaks. It's power that doesn't diminish others but elevates them. It's power that doesn't take from the world but adds to it. Power without application is just potential energy sitting idle in a battery. You can understand every principle, master every concept, and memorize every truth. But until you live these ideas in your daily reality, they remain nothing more than interesting thoughts. The transformation happens when philosophy becomes practice. when understanding becomes action, when knowledge becomes wisdom. Living this philosophy isn't about perfection, it's about practice. Every day presents countless opportunities to choose flow over force, ease over struggle, being over having. Some days you'll remember and apply these principles gracefully. Other days you'll forget and fall back into old patterns of pushing and striving. Both experiences teach you something valuable. The goal isn't to become someone who never struggles, it's to become someone who struggles more intelligently. When you do encounter resistance, instead of immediately pushing harder, you and ask different questions. What is this resistance trying to teach me? What am I missing? How can I work with this situation instead of against it? Who here caught themselves forcing something just yesterday? Raise your hands, keep them up, look around. We're all works in progress, all students in the school of life, all learning to apply these principles one situation at a time. The difference isn't in being perfect, it's in being aware. Sometimes resistance is telling you to change your approach. Sometimes it's telling you to change your timing. Sometimes it's telling you to change your destination entirely. Learning to read these signals accurately comes from patient observation and honest self-reflection, not from forcing predetermined outcomes. In your relationships, this philosophy transforms how you connect with others. Instead of trying to change people, you accept them as they are while clearly communicating your own boundaries and needs. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you focus on showing up authentically and letting relationships develop naturally. Think about your closest relationships. Are you constantly trying to fix the other person? Are you always waiting for them to become who you think they should be? Are you holding back parts of yourself to keep them comfortable? This approach creates tension, resentment, and ultimately distance between you and the people you care about most. The person who's desperate for love repels it through their neediness. They become energy vampires, constantly seeking reassurance, validation, and proof that they're worthy of affection. Their relationships become transactions where they trade favors for feelings, where they sacrifice authenticity for acceptance. But the person who's complete within themselves attracts others through their self-sufficiency and genuine interest in connecting without agenda. They love without losing themselves, give without keeping score, and receive without feeling obligated. How many of you have ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have because you were afraid of being alone? Be honest. Raise your hands. That fear of solitude keeps you trapped in situations that don't serve anyone involved. But when you become comfortable with your own company, you're free to choose relationships that enhance your life rather than complete it. The person who needs a relationship to feel whole will attract others who also feel incomplete, creating partnerships built on mutual neediness rather than mutual strength. But the person who's already whole attracts others who are also complete, creating relationships that multiply happiness rather than divide emptiness. This doesn't mean being cold or distant, it means loving from fullness rather than lack, giving from abundance rather than scarcity, connecting from strength rather than weakness. It means being so secure in your own worth that you don't need anyone else to validate it. In your career, this philosophy means pursuing work that energizes rather than drains you, developing skills that feel like natural extensions of your talents rather than foreign impositions, and creating value for others as the most reliable path to creating value for yourself. Most people approach their careers like they're serving a life sentence. They drag themselves to jobs they hate, working for people they don't respect, doing tasks that feel meaningless, all while telling themselves that this sacrifice will somehow lead to happiness later. But the entrepreneur who's aligned with this philosophy doesn't chase every opportunity. They wait for the opportunities that resonate with their strengths and values. They don't try to force growth. They create conditions for sustainable expansion. They don't compete through desperation. They compete through differentiation and excellence. Who here loves Monday mornings? Really loves them? Raise your hands high. Look at those faces again. These people have found the secret of aligned work. They've stopped trying to separate their authentic selves from their professional selves. They've integrated who they are with what they do. This integration is possible for everyone, but it requires courage to be honest about what actually energizes you versus what you think should energize you. It requires patience to develop skills that feel natural rather than forced. It requires wisdom to recognize that the fastest path to success isn't always the most direct one. In your personal development, this philosophy means working with your natural tendencies rather than against them. If you're naturally introverted, you develop your ability to connect deeply with fewer people rather than trying to become a social butterfly. If you're naturally creative, you find ways to incorporate creativity into your work rather than suppressing it for the sake of conformity. The key insight is that you already have everything you need to succeed. You just need to stop covering it up with layers of trying to be someone else. Your authentic self, when fully expressed and intelligently directed, is more powerful than any persona you could construct. This doesn't mean being lazy or undisciplined. It means being disciplined about the right things, the things that actually matter, the things that create compound results over time, the things that align with your deepest values and highest aspirations. Discipline becomes easier when it's authentic discipline, rather than imposed discipline. When you're disciplined about things you truly care about, it doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like devotion. When you're committed to outcomes you genuinely desire, consistency becomes natural rather than forced. How many of you have tried to develop habits that you thought you should want but didn't actually want? Raise your hands. How long did those habits last? Exactly. The person who's trying to impose discipline on themselves through willpower alone will eventually exhaust their willpower and revert to old patterns. But the person who's found their authentic motivation has access to a renewable source of energy that doesn't depend on willpower. They don't have to force themselves to work on things they love. They have to force themselves to stop working on them so they can attend to other necessary activities. This is why so many people fail at their New Year's resolutions. They're trying to force themselves to want things they think they should want rather than understanding what they actually want. They're imposing external standards rather than developing internal standards. But when you take the time to understand what you truly value, what genuinely energizes you, what naturally calls to your deepest self, discipline becomes devotion. You don't have to motivate yourself to pursue your authentic interests. You have to regulate yourself so you don't become obsessed with them. This is the secret of sustainable success, finding the intersection between what you're naturally good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you love doing. When you operate from this intersection, success becomes inevitable because you're working with all the fundamental forces instead of against any of them. But finding this intersection requires honest self-examination. You must distinguish between what you think you want and what you actually want, between what others expect of you and what you expect of yourself, between who you've been conditioned to be and who you naturally are. This process of self-examination can be uncomfortable because it often reveals that you've been living someone else's version of your life. You might find that the career you've built doesn't align with your values, that the relationships you've maintained don't nourish your soul, that the goals you've been pursuing don't actually matter to you. When these realizations arise, you have a choice. You can continue living the life you've constructed to please others, or you can begin the process of aligning your external reality with your internal truth. Neither choice is easy, but only one leads to authentic fulfillment. The courage to live authentically isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily choice to honor your truth even when it's inconvenient, to express your real thoughts even when they're unpopular, to pursue your genuine interests even when they seem impractical. This courage is developed gradually, like muscle strength that increases with regular exercise. You start with small acts of authenticity, expressing a genuine opinion in a safe conversation, trying an activity you're curious about even if you're not naturally talented at it, saying no to requests that don't align with your priorities. Each act of authenticity builds your confidence in your own judgment and your tolerance for others' potential disapproval. Over time, you realize that most people actually respect authenticity more than they respect people-pleasing, even when they disagree with your choices. Who here has ever said yes when they meant no just to avoid conflict? Raise your hands. Keep them up. This is one of the most common ways we betray ourselves, agreeing to things we don't actually want to do to maintain false harmony. But this false harmony always comes at the cost of authentic relationship. The person who's always trying to make everyone happy makes no one happy, including themselves. But the person who's clear about their values and boundaries while remaining kind and respectful creates space for genuine relationships based on mutual understanding rather than false agreement. This clarity eliminates much of the drama and confusion that characterizes many people's lives. When you know who you are and what you stand for, decisions become simpler. When you're clear about your priorities, time management becomes more straightforward. When you're honest about your capabilities and limitations, you can make realistic commitments and keep them. This reliability to yourself and others becomes one of your greatest assets. In a world full of people who make promises they can't keep and commitments they won't honor, being someone whose word can be trusted is incredibly valuable. But this reliability must start with being reliable to yourself. If you can't keep the promises you make to yourself, why should others trust the promises you make to them? If you don't respect your own boundaries, why should others respect them? Self-respect is the foundation of all other forms of respect. When you treat yourself with dignity, others naturally treat you with dignity. When you value your own time, others value your time. When you honor your own needs, others learn to honor them as well. This doesn't mean being selfish or inconsiderate. It means being so secure in your own worth that you can afford to be generous with others. It means being so clear about your own needs that you can help others meet their needs without sacrificing your well-being. The person who gives from emptiness eventually has nothing left to give, but the person who gives from fullness can give generously without being depleted. They can love without losing themselves, serve without becoming servile, help without becoming helpless. This fullness isn't something you achieve once and maintain forever. It's something you cultivate daily through practices that nourish your body, mind, and spirit. These practices become non-negotiable, not because you're rigid, but because you've learned through experience that they're essential for your well-being. When your well-being is secure, you can weather any storm. When your inner resources are abundant, you can handle any demand. When your foundation is solid, you can build as high as you dream. But this foundation isn't built in a day. It's built through years of consistent choices to honor your authentic self, to develop your natural gifts, to align your actions with your values, and to treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a dear friend. Most people are harder on themselves than they would ever be on someone they care about. They criticize themselves with a harshness they would consider cruel if directed at others. They hold themselves to standards they would never impose on anyone else. This internal cruelty creates massive resistance to success. When you're constantly fighting against yourself, when you're always finding fault with your efforts, when you're never satisfied with your progress, you create an environment where growth becomes extremely difficult. But when you become your own friend instead of your own enemy, when you treat yourself with compassion instead of criticism, when you celebrate your progress instead of focusing on your failures, you create conditions where transformation happens naturally. The paradox is complete. By stopping the desperate attempt to get what you want and instead becoming what you seek, you naturally attract everything you need. By releasing your grip on outcomes and focusing on process, you achieve better outcomes than you ever could have forced. By trusting the wisdom of life rather than fighting against it, you find that life has been conspiring in your favor all along. The delays were preparation. The obstacles were redirection. The failures were education. The pain was purification. Who here can think of a time when something that seemed terrible at the moment turned out to be exactly what you needed? Raise your hands, look around. We all have these stories because life's intelligence is far greater than our limited perspective. What appears to be working against us is often working for us in ways we can't yet see. You already are what you've been seeking. You already have what you've been trying to get. You already know what you've been trying to learn. The path isn't about acquiring something new. It's about removing everything that's been covering up what was always there. Stop trying to get it. You already have it. Stop trying to become it. You already are it. Stop trying to find it. It was never lost. The search is over. The seeking can end. What you've been looking for has been looking back at you from every mirror, speaking to you in every moment of silence, waiting patiently for you to stop running long enough to recognize it. This is the ultimate freedom, realizing that you never needed to be anywhere other than where you are, anyone other than who you are, or have anything other than what you have to be complete. Completeness was never a destination. It was always your starting point. From this place of wholeness, all things become possible. From this foundation of self-acceptance, all dreams become achievable. From this recognition of your inherent worth, all of life becomes an adventure rather than a struggle. The philosophy is simple. The practice is lifelong. The rewards are infinite. You've spent your entire life trying to get somewhere else, to become someone else, to have something else. But the greatest gift you can give yourself is the recognition that you already are, right now in this moment, everything you've ever sought. Stop trying to get it. You'll have it. Be it. Do it. Live it. You already are everything you seek. The transformation isn't about changing who you are, it's about remembering who you've always been beneath all the layers of conditioning, beneath all the masks of pretense, beneath all the armor of protection. You are the consciousness observing these words. You are the awareness experiencing this moment. You are the spirit that remains constant while everything else changes. From this perspective, nothing can be added to you because nothing is missing. Nothing can be taken from you because your essence is untouchable. This realization doesn't end your growth, it begins it. When you're no longer trying to become worthy, you're free to express your worth. When you're no longer trying to become complete, you're free to share your completeness. When you're no longer trying to get somewhere else, you're free to fully inhabit where you are. The journey continues. But the desperate seeking ends. The path remains, but the struggling stops. The adventure goes on, but the suffering is over. You've found what you've been looking for, and you can finally rest in the knowing that you always had it. You always were it, you never lost it. This is living the philosophy, moving through life with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, the gentle strength that comes from accepting your own humanity, and the effortless power that comes from being completely yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you someone else. The secret is revealed. The mystery is solved, the treasure is found. It was always you.